The wooden pew was hard beneath me, but the stiffness in my back came from something deeper. Sunlight streamed through the stained glass window, painting a picture of Jesus with a lamb in his arms with brilliant colors that fell across my lap. I kept my eyes on Pastor Mike, his voice a warm, steady drone about faith and family. My family sat on either side of me. My daughter, Sarah, to my right, her hand resting gently on my arm. Her husband, Mac, to my left, a solid, silent presence. To anyone else, we were a picture of devotion. Then Sarah shifted. She stood up, smoothing her floral dress. A soft murmur of approval rippled through the congregation. She often shared prayers. She was so good at it. Pastor Mike, she began, her voice sweet and clear. I'd like to ask for prayers today for my father. She turned and gave me a look so full of pity it felt like a shove. We are praying for his confusion. These last few months, his mind hasn't been what it used to be. He gets so stubborn, so forgetful. We just ask for patience and guidance as we try to do what's best for him. The air in the church thickened with sympathetic sounds. Heads nodded. An old woman in front of me dabbed her eye with a tissue. I felt every pair of eyes on me, seeing not Arthur Bell, retired history teacher, but confused, fading old man. My face grew warm. I did what was expected. I bowed my head, but my eyes stayed open, fixed on the scuffed toes of my own Sunday shoes. Hurt, cold and sharp, twisted in my chest. This was their public story, and they were telling it perfectly. As the prayer continued, my mind flashed back. It was a memory from just 3 months ago. I'd come home from the library, thinking the house was empty, but their voices were drifting from the kitchen, low and serious. The lawyer said a guardianship is the cleanest way. Mark had said, once the court agrees is incapable, we control everything. The house, the pension, all of it. But is it right, Mark? Sarah's voice had wavered. Here's my dad. Here's a liability. Sarah, he almost left the stove on last week. Think of the kid's future. Think of our debt. This house is worth a fortune. He doesn't even know what to do with it. I had frozen in the hallway, my library books feeling like bricks in my arms. My own children thought I was a liability, a fortune to be managed. The memory was a punch that still stole my breath. As Sarah finished a prayer and sat down, sniffling delicately, I lifted my head. My eyes scanned the congregation. Near the back, a man in a simple, well-fitted suit caught my gaze. Ben Carter. We'd been friends since college, though he'd become a lawyer and I a teacher. He didn't look away in pity. Instead, he gave a slow, deliberate blink, a subtle, almost invisible wink. It was a tiny gesture, but in that sea of false sympathy, it felt like a lifeline. It was a signal. The plan was in motion. The service ended, and the organ began to play. The hurt inside me began to harden into something else. Something patient and strong. Before we continue, please subscribe and share. Thanks. The congregation began to rise, a rustle of jackets and hymn books. Pastor Mike stood at the front, beaming. God's peace to you all. Please join us for coffee and fellowship in the hall. The handshake line began to form. It was a tradition, a time for warm greetings and kind words. Today, it would be a stage. I stood, my legs feeling steadier than they had all morning. Sarah took my arm, her grip firm, possessive. You did so well, Dad, she whispered, her voice sweet as poison. Everyone is praying for you. I just patted her hand. We moved toward the door where Pastor Mike stood. I shook his hand, feeling the familiar, callous grip. A beautiful service, Mike, I said, my voice clear and steady. Thank you, Arthur. Good to see you and the family. His eyes held a genuine warmth that made a pang of guilt shoot through me. But I smothered it. Then it was our turn to become part of the line. We stood, the three of us, greeting our friends and neighbors. Sarah was radiant, the devoted daughter. Mark was a strong, supportive son-in-law. And I was the slightly bewildered father, smiling benignly. So good to see you, Arthur. We are thinking of you. Such a blessing, your family. I nodded and smiled, shaking each hand. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat beneath my calm exterior. In my inside jacket pocket were 2 thick, legal-sized envelopes. They felt like they were burning a hole against my chest. My children stood to my left. Sarah was chatting with Mrs. Gable about a recipe. Mark was laughing with a deacon about the football game. This was the moment. I turned to them, my smile widening into what I hoped looked like a father's proud, loving expression. I am so blessed by you both, I said, my voice thick with an emotion they completely misread. I opened my arms. Sarah came into the hug first. Oh, Dad, she murmured into my shoulder. As I embraced her, my right hand slipped the envelope from my pocket and into the large purse hanging from her elbow. It slid in without a sound. I released her and turned to Mark. He gave me a firm, backslapping hug. Love you, old man, he said, the words ringing hollow. My left hand performed the same magic, tucking the second envelope into the inside pocket of his suit jacket, right next to his heart. They pulled away, none the wiser. What was it for? Dad? Sarah asked, her eyes a little teary from the performance. I smiled, the picture of innocence. I just wanted to give you a little something. For later. Don't open it until you get home, all right? It's a surprise for lunch. Their faces lit up with genuine, greedy delight. They thought it was a check, a peace offering, a sign of my surrender. Oh, Dad, you shouldn't have. Sarah said, kissing my cheek. Mark clapped me on the back again. Thanks, Arthur. We'll see you at home. They walked away, arms linked, smiling and nodding to friends, completely unaware of the fire I had just placed in their hands. I watched them go, my own smile finally fading into something neutral. Ben Carter gave me one last, slight nod as he passed. The service was over. Mine was just beginning. I drove home alone, the silence in my car a welcome relief. I replayed the morning in my head. The public prayer, the pitying looks, the secret delivery. It had gone perfectly. My hands were steady on the wheel. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt resolved, like a soldier who had just completed the first, crucial maneuver in a long-planned battle. I pulled into my driveway and entered my quiet, empty house. I went straight to the small study off the living room. This was my sanctuary. My books lined the walls, and my old, sturdy desk set under the window. On it was a small, digital voice recorder. I pressed play. Mark's voice filled the quiet room. The lawyer said a guardianship is the cleanest way. Once the court agrees is incapable, we control everything. The house, the pension, all of it. Then Sarah's. But is it right? Mark? Here's my dad. Is a liability. Sarah, this house is worth a fortune. He doesn't even know what to do with it. I stopped the recording. That conversation, overheard 3 months ago, had been the wake-up call. The moment I realized the kindness was a lie. That was when I had called Ben. The plan started small. Ben explained everything. Guardianship. How they could use it to strip me of my rights. Take my house. Control my money. He told me what I needed to do. Evidence, Arthur, he'd said. We need proof of their intentions and proof of your sound mind. So, I became a secret agent in my own home. I bought the recorder. I started documenting everything. I found their secret file in Mark's office. Notes, lawyers' letters, a timeline for filing the petition. I photographed every page. I started taking pictures of the house, clean and organized, to prove I was capable. I kept a journal, logging every condescending remark, every time they treated me like a child. It was hard. The hardest part was pretending. Pretending I didn't hear their whispered plans. Pretending I believed their lies. I had to be the confused old man they thought I was, while secretly gathering the weapons to defend myself. I heard their car pull into the driveway. The engine cut off. 2 car doors slammed. I didn't move from my desk. I listened. The front door opened. Dad, we are home. Sarah called out, her voice light and happy. I didn't answer. I just waited. Silence for a moment. Then, the rustle of paper. Sarah must have opened the post. Mark must have reached into his jacket. The silence that followed was different. It was heavy, confused. What is this? Sarah's voice was a whisper. Then, Mark's voice, sharp and angry. Is this a joke? I allowed myself a small, cold smile. The surprise had been delivered. The envelopes didn't contain a check. They contained a summons, a legal notice informing them that I, Arthur Bell, was suing them to prevent the establishment of a guardianship. It was a countersuit, accusing them of attempted elder abuse. Ben had filed the papers on Friday. The church handoff was just my own personal touch. Dad! The cry was sharp, panicked. Footsteps hurried toward my study. The battle for my life had officially begun. The door to my study flew open. Sarah stood there, her face pale, the legal papers clutched in a shaking hand. Mark was right behind her, his face a thundercloud. What is the meaning of this, Arthur? Mark spat my name like it was a curse. He waved his copy of the summons. A restraining order? A lawsuit. I turned slowly in my chair to face them. I kept my face calm, my hands resting on the arms of the chair. It seemed self-explanatory. Mac, I said, my voice even. You are attempting to take control of my life. I am refusing to let you. Sarah took a step into the room, her eyes wide with disbelief. Dad, how could you? We were going to talk to you about this. We were just trying to help you. This is just cruel. She started to cry, real tears of shock and anger. Help me. I repeated. I stood up, and for the first time in months, I didn't slouch. I stood to my full height, looking my daughter directly in the eye. You were planning to go to a judge behind my back. You stood in front of our entire church and called me confused. That wasn't help. Sarah, that was a performance. Mark stepped forward, jabbing a finger at me. You are confused. You forget things. You can't manage this house by yourself. We have your best interests at heart. Do you? I asked quietly. Or do you have the interests of my house and my pension at heart? I heard you, Mark, 3 months ago, in the kitchen. I heard you call me a liability. The color drained from both their faces. The secret was out. They knew I knew. You don't understand the stress we are under. Sarah wailed, collapsing into a chair. The debts, the kids' college funds. We are drowning. And you're sitting here in this big, empty house, hoarding all your money. So, there it was. The truth. Finally, it wasn't about my well-being. It was about my assets. This house, I said, looking around my study, is paid for with a lifetime of work. My pension is for my retirement. It is not your emergency fund. Mark's phone buzzed. He pulled it out, his eyes scanning the screen. His face went from red to a sickly gray. It's Pastor Mike, he muttered. He got a call from Ben Carter. Ben told him everything, to preempt any gossip. He looked up at me, his eyes blazing with a new kind of fear. The fear of public shame. The whole church is going to know. I didn't answer. I just watched them. The perfect, devoted family was crumbling right in front of me. The papers in their hands were no longer just legal documents. They were a mirror, showing them exactly who they had become. The following week was a silent war fought within the walls of my own home. Sarah and Mark moved around me like ghosts, speaking in hushed, urgent tones when they thought I couldn't hear. They stopped pretending to be caregivers. The masks were off. The air was thick with their panic and their rage. They tried to fight back, of course. They scheduled an appointment with a new lawyer, a slick-looking man from the city. I knew because I recorded their conversation about it from the hallway. He can't do this. Mark's voice was a frustrated snarl. We have to get this thrown out. He's clearly not in his right mind. This proves it. Suing his own family. But he seems so normal, Sarah replied, her voice thin and weary. What if the judge believes him? He's a good actor. We need a doctor to declare him incompetent. We need to move fast. I stopped listening. They were scrambling, and it was exactly what Ben and I had expected. Their entire plan had relied on my ignorance and my compliance. They had no strategy for a fight. The community, our church community, began to react. My phone started to ring. It was Mrs. Gable, the recipe lady. "Arthur, I just heard, well, a rumor. Is everything all right?" Sarah seemed so upset after service. I chose my words carefully. "It's a family matter, Eleanor. A legal misunderstanding. I'm sure it will all be sorted out." I was polite, but vague. I was letting them wonder. I was letting the story they had told about me, the story of a confused old man, crumble under the weight of my calm, rational demeanor. Pastor Mike came to visit. He sat in my living room, his kind face etched with concern. "Arthur, Ben Carter called me. He explained your side of things. He said the children were trying to take guardianship. This is a very serious accusation." "It's a very serious situation, Mike," I said. "I love having them live here. I thought we were helping each other. But I can't allow them to take everything from me because they've made some poor financial decisions. They say you're not capable." I smiled, a sad, gentle smile. "Mike, you've known me for 20 years. Do I seem incapable to you? Or do I seem like a father who has been pushed too far?" He looked at me, really looked at me. He saw a man who was hurt, but clear-eyed and resolute. He didn't see confusion. He saw determination. He left an hour later, his hand on my shoulder, his prayers for peace and wisdom feeling more genuine than any prayer I'd heard in months. The tide was turning. The first skirmishes were over. The real battle, the one in the courtroom, was still to come. But as I sat in my quiet house that evening, I knew I had already won a crucial victory. I had taken back my story. I was no longer the confused old man. I was Arthur Bell, a man fighting for his life, and I was not fighting alone. The doorbell rang, a cheerful sound that felt out of place in the tense house. I answered it to find Ben Carter standing on my porch, a leather briefcase in one hand and a determined look on his face. "Ready for our meeting, Arthur?" he asked, his voice businesslike. "Come in, Ben," I said, stepping aside. "They're in the living room." We walked in together. Sarah and Mark were on the couch, looking like defendants awaiting a verdict. Ben didn't sit. He placed his briefcase on the coffee table and clicked it open. "We are here to discuss the discovery process," Ben began without preamble. "The court requires both sides to share all evidence. Arthur has complied." He pulled out a thick stack of papers and slid it across the table toward them. "This is a copy of everything we will be presenting to the judge." Mark stared at the stack like it was a snake. Sarah tentatively picked it up. Her eyes scanned the first page, a log of my documented evidence. I saw a breath catch. What is all this?" she whispered. "It's the truth," I said quietly from my chair. Ben pointed to the stack. "You'll find dated transcripts of your conversations, including the one from 3 months ago in the kitchen where you discussed the guardianship as a clean way to control Arthur's assets. You'll find photographs of Arthur's financial records, showing he is fully capable of managing his accounts. You'll also find copies of the documents we retrieved from your home office. Mark, the timeline for the petition, the notes on his so-called declined debt." Mark's face was purple. "You had no right to go through my office." "It's my house," I reminded him, my voice calm but firm. "I have every right." Sarah was flipping through the pages, her hands trembling violently. She reached a section with photos. One was of the kitchen, perfectly clean. The next was of my checkbook, neatly balanced. Then, a photo of her, caught on my phone's camera, moving my medication bottles to a higher shelf while telling me, "It's for your own safety, Dad, so you don't get confused." She made a small, choked sound and dropped the papers. They scattered across the floor. She looked at me, her eyes wide with a new kind of fear. She wasn't just facing a legal loss. She was facing the exposure of every lie, every manipulation. Ben's case wasn't just strong. It was airtight. He had boxed them in with their own words and actions. "The court date is set for 3 weeks from today," Ben said, closing his briefcase. I suggest you discuss this with your attorney. A settlement is always preferable to a public courtroom defeat. He nodded to me and left. The silence in the living room was heavier than ever. Sarah stared at the scattered papers on the floor. Mac just put his head in his hands. The mountain of evidence was too high for them to climb. For the first time, I saw the certainty of their victory crack and shatter, replaced by the cold, hard reality of their impending loss. The next few days were a blur of quiet activity. Sarah and Mark spent hours on the phone with their lawyer, their voices hushed and frantic. I kept to my routine. I went for my morning walk. I worked in my garden. I visited the library. I was living my life, calmly and capably, and I made sure the neighbors saw it. One afternoon, I came home to find Sarah waiting for me in the living room. Her eyes were red-rimmed. The scattered evidence had been neatly stacked back on the coffee table. "Dad," she began, her voice raw. "We need to talk. Without lawyers." I sat down opposite her. "I'm listening." "This has gotten out of hand," she said, twisting a tissue in her hands. "We never meant for it to go this far. We were just scared." "Scared of what?" I asked, though I knew the answer. "Of the future. Of having nothing. Mark's business. It's bad, Dad. We're in so much debt. We thought if we could just manage things for you, it would help us all." The lies were still there, woven into a new, desperate story. Managing things for me is one thing. Sarah, trying to have a judge declare me mentally incompetent so you can sell my house is another. She flinched. "We wouldn't have sold the house. We would have taken care of you." The documents in Mark's office mention a liquidation of non-essential assets. I said flatly, "This house is my only asset. What did you think that meant?" She had no answer. The tissue in her hand shredded. "What do you want, Dad? Do you want us to leave? Is that it?" "I want my life back," I said, my voice low and steady. "I want to live in my home without being treated like a child. I want to know that the people I love aren't plotting against me." "We do love you," she cried, the tears starting again. "Love doesn't look like this, Sarah," I said, and I felt a profound sadness wash over me. "Love doesn't involve secret plans and public humiliation. You prayed for patience with me. Maybe you should have prayed for honesty with yourselves." I stood up and left her there, crying on the couch. The conversation was over. There was nothing more to say. The path was set, and it led straight to the courtroom. I had offered them a chance to be my family again, and they had chosen to be my adversaries. Now, a judge would decide our future. The morning of the court hearing arrived, cool and gray. I put on my best suit, the one I wore to my wife's funeral. It felt appropriate. I was laying something to rest a day. Ben picked me up, and we drove to the courthouse in silence. My stomach was a knot of nerves, but my mind was clear. The courtroom was formal and intimidating. The high ceilings, the flags, the judge's bench. It was designed to make you feel small. But I didn't feel small. I felt focused. Sarah and Mark were already there with their lawyer. They didn't look at me. Judge Wilkins was a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense manner. She called the court to order. Their lawyer, Mr. Dalton, went first. He painted a picture of a concerned family. He talked about my forgetfulness, my stubbornness, my inability to manage modern finances. He made it sound like they were heroes, trying to save me from myself. Then it was Ben's turn. He stood up, calm and confident. "Your Honor, my client, Mr. Arthur Bell, is a retired teacher, a deacon in his church, and a man of sound mind and body. What we have here is not a case of a declining elder, but a case of attempted financial exploitation." He approached the bench with our evidence. "We have here a transcript from a recording Mr. Bell made after he became aware of his family's intentions." He began to read, and Mark's voice, clear and calculating, filled the quiet room. The lawyer said a guardianship is the cleanest way. Once the court agrees is incapable, we control everything. The house, the pension, all of it. I saw Sarah shrink in her seat. I saw Mark's shoulders tense. Ben continued, reading Sarah's response. But is it right? Mark, here's my dad. And Mark's chilling reply is a liability. Sarah, this house is worth a fortune. He doesn't even know what to do with it. Ben stopped reading. The words hung in the air. You could have heard a pin drop. He then entered the photographed documents from Mark's office into evidence. The timeline, the notes on my confusion, the appraisal of my house. Mr. Dalton tried to object, but the evidence was real. It was their own words, their own plans, come back to haunt them. Ben had dismantled their entire case in under 10 minutes. He hadn't just offended me. He had exposed them. The looks on their faces were a mixture of sheer panic and deep, profound shame. They were crumbling right there in front of the judge, the bailiff, and everyone else in the courtroom. Their perfect plan had exploded in their faces. Judge Wilkins adjusted her glasses and looked down at my children. Her expression was not angry, but it was deeply disappointed. That was worse. The court has heard compelling evidence today, she began, her voice echoing in the silent room. The petition for guardianship over Mr. Arthur Bell is based on claims of cognitive decline. However, the evidence presented by Mr. Bell's counsel does not demonstrate a lack of capacity. Rather, it demonstrates a clear-minded individual who has uncovered a concerted effort to misrepresent his state of mind for financial gain. She looked directly at Sarah and Mark. The transcript of your conversation is particularly damning. You did not express concern for your father's well-being. You expressed a desire to control his assets. That is not the purpose of a guardianship. A guardianship is a protective measure, not a predatory one. Sarah was crying silently, her face buried in her hands. Mark stared straight ahead, his jaw clenched, his face a mask of defeat. Therefore, Judge Wilkins said, her tone final, the petition for guardianship is denied. Permanently. Relief washed over me so powerfully I had to grip the table. It was over. I had won. But the judge wasn't finished. She turned to Ben. Counselor, given the evidence of attempted exploitation, does your client wish to pursue further legal action? There are grounds for a civil suit here. Ben glanced at me. We had discussed this. I gave a small, almost imperceptible shake of my head. I had what I wanted. I didn't need to destroy them further. My client's only wish was to secure his autonomy. Your Honor, Ben said. That has been achieved. Judge Wilkins nodded, a flicker of respect in her eyes. Very well. Case dismissed. She brought down her gavel. The sound was like a gunshot, marking the end of the battle. It was done. The legal system had seen the truth. I was a free man. As we stood to leave, I finally looked at my children. The victory fell hollow for a moment, seeing their utter devastation. But then I remembered the prayer in church, the public pity, the secret plans. They had brought this on themselves. I walked out of the courtroom with my head held high, my future back in my own hands. The news spread through our church community faster than a wildfire. By the next Sunday, everyone knew. Arthur Bell, the confused old man, had beaten his children in court. The story of their deception was the talk of the congregation. When I walked into the church that morning, the atmosphere was different. There were no pitying looks. Instead, people came up to me, gripping my hand, patting my back. We had no idea, Arthur. You're a brave man. We are so sorry we believed them. Their words were kind, but I just nodded and smiled. I didn't want their apologies. I just wanted my life back. I took my usual seat, alone this time. I saw Sarah and Mark slip into a pew at the very back. They didn't look at anyone. The shame was a heavy cloak on their shoulders. Pastor Mike stepped up to the pulpit. He looked out at the congregation, his face serious. Brothers and sisters, he began, last week, we witnessed a painful family situation play out in our midst. It's a reminder that we must be careful in our judgments. We must remember the commandment that comes with a promise. Honor your father and mother. He didn't look at Sarah and Mark, but everyone knew who he was talking about. His sermon was about true honor, about respect, about caring for our elders without seeking to control them. It was about love that serves, not love that steals. It was the exact opposite of the sermon I'd had to endure just a few weeks before. As he spoke, I didn't feel smug. I felt a deep, resonant peace. The truth was out. The community that had once sided with my children now saw them for what they had done. The narrative had been completely reversed. When the choir stood to sing Amazing Grace, I stood with them. I didn't just listen. I sang. My voice wasn't the best, but it was loud and clear. I sang about being lost and then being found. It felt truer than any hymn I had ever sung. I was found. I was free. And as I sang, I saw Sarah, in the back row, finally look at me. Her eyes were full of tears, but for the first time, they looked like tears of regret, not performance. The first stone of the wall between us had crumbled. The final chord of Amazing Grace faded, but a new silence, thick and uncomfortable, filled the church. People began gathering their belongings, their movement slow, their eyes darting toward the back pew where my children sat today. I remained in my spot, feeling the weight of hundreds of curious glances. Then, an older gentleman, Mr. Henderson, who taught Sunday school with me for years, walked over. He didn't offer pity. He gripped my shoulder, his eyes firm. "Should have known you were sharper than they made out, Arthur," he said, his voice low. "A man doesn't forget 30 years of Bible verses because he turned 70. His words were a balm. Others followed, not with apologies, but with quiet, respectful nods. The community's allegiance had shifted. I was no longer a victim. I was a respected elder who had stood his ground. I saw Sarah and Mark make a hurried escape out the side door, avoiding the handshake line entirely. Their retreat felt like a surrender. Pastor Mike caught my eye from the pulpit and gave me a small, solemn nod. He had seen the truth in court, and his sermon had been his public stand. As I walked out into the sunlight, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt validated. The house of God had been used to spread a lie about me, and now, within those same walls, the truth had been acknowledged. The first part of my healing could finally begin. The following Tuesday, my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Sarah standing alone on the porch. Her hands were clenched, her posture defeated. I took a deep breath and opened the door. "Dad," she whispered, her eyes red and puffy. Can we talk?" I stepped aside. She walked in and stood in the middle of the living room, looking lost. The house felt different with just the two of us in it, the ghosts of the family we used to be haunting the space between us. "I'm so sorry," she blurted out, tears starting to fall. "What we did, it was horrible. I was so scared about money, about the future. And Mark, he made it sound so logical. He said it was for your own good. I let myself believe it because it was easier than facing our problems." I didn't speak. I let her pour it out, this first real, unscripted confession. The way everyone looked at us in church. I've never been so ashamed. She hugged herself, shivering. I lost my dad, and I lost my church family in 1 week. I don't even know who I'm anymore. "You're my daughter," I said, my voice rough with emotion. "You made a terrible, greedy mistake, but you are still my daughter." She looked up, hope flickering in her wet eyes. "Can you ever forgive me?" "Forgiveness isn't a switch, Sarah," I said gently. "It's a path. You can't just say sorry and have everything go back to the way it was. The trust is broken. You have to own it back." She nodded, wiping her nose with her sleeve, a gesture so childlike it broke my heart. "How? What can I do?" "Start by being honest," I said. "With me, with yourself, and with Mark. This wasn't just his idea. You stood in that pulpit and lied. You have to own that." It was the hardest thing I'd ever said to her. But for the first time, I saw not a schemer, but my little girl, truly remorseful and afraid of losing her father forever. The journey back would be long, but a visit was the first, fragile step. A few days later, Mark showed up. He didn't ring the bell. I found him sitting on my front porch steps, his head in his hands. I opened the screen door and stood there, waiting. He didn't look up. "I've been fired," he said, his voice hollow. "The story got around. Untrustworthy." That's what they said. I felt a pang of something that wasn't quite sympathy, but wasn't satisfaction either. It was a consequence of his actions, arriving right on schedule. Sarah left me. He continued, the words flat. She's staying with a friend. She says she can't look at me. Says I poisoned her against you. Did you? I asked, my tone neutral. He finally lifted his head. His face was haggard. Yes. No. I don't know. I saw a way out of my mess, and I took it. I sold her the idea. I'm the villain in this story, Arthur. I know that. He stood up, turning to face me. There was no anger left in him, just a crushing defeat. I'm not asking for your forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I'm leaving town. There's nothing for me here anymore. I came to say that I'm sorry. For what it's worth. He turned and walked away, down the path to his car. I watched him go. He was right. He was a villain. But seeing him broken and alone, his life in ruins, didn't bring me the joy I thought it might. It just felt sad. A life derailed by greed. I went back inside, the house feeling quieter and more empty than ever. One chapter had definitively closed. With Mark gone and Sarah seeking redemption, a strange calm settled over my life. I started having coffee with Ben once a week, not as a client, but as a friend. Rosalind, the woman from the library who had first encouraged me, began joining us. We became a trio, sharing stories and laughter. I was rebuilding a social life, one based on genuine connection, not obligation. One evening, Sarah came over for dinner. It was awkward at first, the silence heavy with unsaid things. But we talked about small, safe topics. The weather, a book I was reading. Slowly, the ice began to crack. The kids ask about you, she said softly over dessert. They miss their grandpa. My heart ached. I miss my grandkids terribly. I'd like to see them, I said. I'd like that too, she replied, and for the first time in a long time, her smile reached her eyes. After she left, I sat on the porch, looking at the stars. The war was over. The battlefield was quiet. I had my house, my freedom, my dignity, and a glimmer of hope for my family. It was more than I had dared to hope for just a few months ago. The revenge I had so carefully planned had achieved its goal, but the outcome was not the destruction of my children. It was a creation of an opportunity for something new, something more honest. The path forward was still unclear, but for the first time, it felt like it was leading somewhere good. The idea came to me on a Sunday morning, as I was sipping coffee and reading the paper. The house was too big for one man. It was filled with memories, both good and bad, but it was also my greatest asset, my security. And now, it could be a tool for healing. I called Ben. I want to draw up new papers. I told him, not a lawsuit, a new will, and a transfer of ownership. I explained my plan. He was silent for a moment. Arthur, are you sure? After everything. I've never been more sure, I said. That afternoon, I asked Sarah to come over. She arrived, looking nervous, probably expecting another difficult conversation. I led her to the kitchen table where a single document lay. What's this? She asked, her voice tentative. It's a transfer of deed, I said calmly. I'm putting the house in both our names. A co-ownership. She stared at the paper, then at me, utterly bewildered. I don't understand. After what I did, why would you do this? Because forgiveness is an action, Sarah, not just a feeling. I said, this house will be yours one day. But this way, it comes with conditions. My conditions. I live here for the rest of my life. It is my home. You cannot sell it. And you cannot ever try to control me again. This is a gift of trust. The last one I may ever be able to give you. Don't make me regret it. Tears streamed down her face, but they were tears of humility and grace. I won't, Dad. I promise. I'll spend the rest of my life making this up to you. She signed the paper, her hand trembling. Then I signed. It wasn't a surrender. It was a strategic peace treaty. I had secured my place in my home forever, and in giving her a share, I was giving her a reason to protect it and me with everything she had. It was, I thought, a miracle built not on faith, but on solid, unshakable legal paperwork. The following Sunday, Pastor Mike paid me a visit. He found me in my garden, tending to my tomato plants. "Mind if I join you, Arthur?" he asked, rolling up his sleeves. He didn't want to talk in the formal living room. He wanted to get his hands dirty beside me. We worked in comfortable silence for a while, pulling weeds and checking for pests. Ben Carter told me about the new ownership papers. He said finally, his tone neutral, not judgmental. "That's a mighty act of grace, Arthur." I sat back on my heels, wiping my brow with a handkerchief. "It's not just grace, Mike. It's smart. It ties her future to mine. She protects this house now because it's partly hers. She protects me because I'm the key to her inheritance. It turns her from a threat into an ally." He nodded slowly, a thoughtful look on his face. "You've always been a wise man, a strategist. I misjudged the situation at the beginning. I saw a family in distress, not a plot in motion. I am sorry for that." "No need for apologies," I said, meaning it. "You see the best in people. It's what makes you a good pastor." I handed him a ripe tomato. "Here, the first of the season." He took it, a smile finally breaking through his solemn expression. "A blessing," he said, and right there, in the sun-warmed earth of my garden, he offered a simple, heartfelt prayer, not for patience or guidance, but for healing, for reconciliation, and for the continued strength of our family. It felt like the first real blessing this house had received in a long, long time. The next weekend, the sound I had missed most filled the house again, the laughter of my grandchildren. Sarah brought them over, 7-year-old Lily and 10-year-old Jake. They burst through the front door, a whirlwind of energy and noise. "Grandpa!" Lily shrieked, launching herself into my arms. Jake, trying to be more mature, gave me a careful hug, but his grin was wide and genuine. "We miss you," Lily said, her small arms wrapped tightly around my neck. "I miss you too, Sweet Pea. More than you know." We spent the afternoon in the backyard. I pushed them on the old tire swing I'd hung from the oak tree years ago. We drew pictures with chalk on the patio stones. The simple, normal joy of it was almost overwhelming. Sarah watched from the porch steps, her eyes shining with tears, but this time they were tears of happiness. She saw what she had almost thrown away. The children's unconditional love for me was the most powerful testimony to the man I really was. Not a confused burden, but their grandpa. Their laughter was the best medicine, healing wounds I thought would never close. That evening, after Sarah and the kids had left, the house felt different. It wasn't just quiet, it was peaceful. The ghosts had been chased away by the sound of children's laughter. I sat in my favorite armchair, a deep contentment settling over me. Rosalind stopped by later with a slice of apple pie from the local bakery. "Heard you had a big day," she said with a warm smile. "The best day," I replied, cutting 2 slices. We sat at the kitchen table, the way we had so many times over the past few months. "You know," I said between bites of flaky crust, "everyone talks about miracles like they're these big, flashy things that break the laws of nature. Parting seas, healing the sick. And you don't think they are?" she asked. "I think sometimes a miracle is just having the right friend show up with a piece of pie at the exact right moment," I said, smiling at her. "Or a legal document that does what it's supposed to. Or a child's hug. Miracles are just good things happening at the right time. And most of them involve a lot of paperwork and patience." Rosalind laughed, a warm, rich sound that filled the kitchen. "So, you're a theologian now, are you?" "Just an old man who's learned a thing or two," I said. And in that moment, surrounded by the quiet comfort of my home and a good friend, I felt like the richest man on earth. The revenge was complete, but it had transformed into something much, much better, a hard-won, deeply appreciated peace. The annual church potluck was always a big event, but this year felt different. The gym was decorated with autumn leaves, and long tables groaned under the weight of casseroles, fried chicken, and pies. This year, I didn't sit in the corner. I walked in with my head held high, and people greeted me with genuine warmth. Sarah and the kids were already there, saving me a seat. Halfway through the meal, Pastor Mike stood up and tapped his glass. Friends, before we dig into dessert, I'd like to invite Arthur Bell to say a few words. A hush fell over the room. This wasn't planned. I looked at Sarah, who gave me an encouraging nod. I stood and walked to the front, my heart pounding, but not from fear. I looked out at the faces of my community, the people who had witnessed my humiliation and my vindication. A few months ago, I began, my voice clear. My family was a subject of a lot of prayer in this room. Prayers for patience with me. I saw people shift uncomfortably. Today, I'm here to thank you. Not for those prayers, but for what came after. You saw the truth. You stood for what was right. And you welcomed me back. I glanced at Sarah. My daughter and I are on a new path now. A path of honesty and forgiveness. It's not an easy path, but it's the right one. My story isn't just about an old man winning a court case. It's a reminder that it's never too late to stand up for yourself, and it's never too late for a family to find its way back. I didn't preach. I just told my truth. When I finished, the applause wasn't loud or wild. It was respectful, heartfelt. As I returned to my seat, an older couple stopped me. Our son is trying to put us in one of those homes, the woman whispered, her eyes full of tears. Hearing you, it gives us courage. My testimony wasn't just for me. It was becoming a beacon for others. The local news segment was Pastor Mike's idea. A reporter from the community channel heard about the courtroom drama that healed a family and wanted to do a story on elder rights and reconciliation. I was hesitant, but Sarah surprised me by agreeing immediately. People should know, Dad, she said. They should know what can happen and how it can be fixed. So, one Tuesday, a camera crew came to my house. They filmed Sarah and me sitting together on the porch swing, talking openly about the lies, the legal battle, and the difficult road to forgiveness. It was nerve-wracking, but it felt important. When we stood in church that day, Sarah said, looking directly into the camera, her voice thick with emotion, I was praying for the wrong thing. I should have been praying for my own heart to change. I almost lost the most important person in my life because of greed and fear. Don't make my mistake. Honor your parents. Truly honor them. The segment aired that weekend. My phone rang for 2 days straight. Friends, distant relatives, even strangers called to say how moved they were. But the most important call was from the director of the county senior center. He asked if Sarah would be willing to share her story there, to speak to other families. She agreed without hesitation. My revenge had sought to expose the truth. Now, that same truth was being used to help others. The story that started with a betrayal in a church pew was ending with a message of hope and warning, broadcast to our entire town to see. My victory was now complete, and it had a purpose far bigger than myself. The call from the senior center director led to something I never expected. The following Thursday, Sarah and I stood together in a community hall, facing a room of 30 or so seniors and their family members. Sarah was pale but determined. She clutched my hand for a moment before letting go and stepping up to the microphone. My name is Sarah, she began, her voice shaky, and I almost had my father declared incompetent so I could take his house and his money. A shocked murmur rippled through the room. She didn't soften it. She told them everything. The debt, the manipulation, the church prayer, the lawsuit. She didn't make excuses. She laid her shame bare for everyone to see. I became the kind of person I used to judge, she said, her voice growing stronger. I saw my dad as a problem to be solved, not a person to be loved. I'm here to tell you, if you're thinking like that, stop. Look at what you're about to lose. The cost is too high. After she finished, a woman in the front row, whose son was trying to control her finances, stood up and thanked Sarah through her tears. Another man asked for Ben Carter's contact information. My daughter, who had once been the villain of my story, was now using her experience to protect others. It was the most powerful redemption I could have ever imagined. After the talk at the senior center, a new routine began. Sarah started volunteering there every Tuesday and Thursday, helping with paperwork, organizing social events, and just listening to the residents. She wasn't doing it for show. I saw the change in her. The frantic, greedy energy was gone, replaced by a quiet humility. One Tuesday, I stopped by to bring her a forgotten lunch. I watched from the doorway as she patiently helped an elderly man fill out a complicated medical form. She was gentle, respectful, and kind. She saw me and smiled, a real, peaceful smile. On the drive home, she was quiet. Then she said, "It feels good, Dad, to help, to actually help, instead of just pretending to." It was in that simple statement that I knew my daughter was truly coming back. The lawsuit had forced a reckoning, but this voluntary work, this giving of her time with no expectation of reward, was rebuilding her character from the ground up. The revenge had broken her. This new path was making her whole again. 6 months after the courtroom showdown, our family, or what was left of it, had found a new rhythm. Sarah and the kids came for dinner every Sunday. The air was clear, the conversations easy. We talk about school, about work, about life. The shadow of the lawsuit was finally lifting. One evening, as we were washing dishes side by side, Sarah turned to me, her hands covered in soap suds. "Dad, I've been thinking about what you said, that forgiveness is a path. I don't think I'm at the end of it yet, but thank you for letting me walk it with you." I put a wet plate on the drying rack and looked at her. "You're my daughter, Sarah. The path goes both ways. I'm learning to trust again. You're learning to be trustworthy again. We'll get there." She leaned her head on my shoulder for a brief moment, a gesture of affection that felt natural and unforced for the first time in years. The elaborate revenge, the legal papers, the public exposure, it had all been a drastic, painful surgery to cut out a sickness. Now, the healing was truly underway. The scar would always be there, but the wound was closed. My story, it seemed, had a longer reach than I thought. A reporter from the regional newspaper picked up on the local news segment and wrote a feature article titled, "From Courtroom to Kitchen Table, One Family's Journey Back from the Brink." It featured a photo of Sarah and me on the porch swing, smiling. The article talked about the growing issue of elder financial exploitation and held up our story as a case study in both the problem and the possibility of reconciliation. It mentioned Ben Carter's legal work and even the support of our church community. I got letters from all over the state. Children who were having second thoughts about moving a parent into a home. Parents who were scared of their own kids. They all said the same thing. "Your story gave us courage. Your story showed us it's not too late." My private battle had become a public lesson. The revenge I had so carefully planned had morphed into a legacy of warning and hope. I kept every single letter in a box in my study. They were a reminder that my pain had not been in vain. A year to the day after I served them papers in the church handshake line, Sarah and the kids came over for a special dinner. We were just finishing dessert when there was a knock at the door. It was Pastor Mike, holding a small, gift-wrap box. "I'm not crashing the party," he said with a smile. "I'm just a delivery man." Sarah took the box, a confused look on her face. She opened it. Inside, on a bed of velvet, was a new key. Tied to it was a tag that read, "Welcome home." She looked at me, her eyes wide. "Dad, what is this?" "It's a key to this house," I said calmly. "Your house. Our house. The transfer of ownership is complete and final as of today. The co-ownership papers are filed. It's officially yours as much as it is mine." She started to cry, but there were tears of joy and overwhelming emotion. I don't know what to say. "You don't have to say anything," I said, my own throat tight. "You've already shown me who you are now. This is just making it official. This is our fresh start." My grandson, Jake, looked up from his cake. "So does this mean we can live here forever, Grandpa?" I ruffled his hair. "Yes, Jake, it does." The revenge was complete, but it had been transformed. It was no longer about winning a fight. It was about securing a future built not on fear and legal documents, but on forgiveness, hard-earned trust, and the unwavering love of a family that had been to hell and back and had chosen to find its way home again. The finality of the key in Sarah's hand seemed to unlock something in both of us. The last remnants of tension dissolved. The house was no longer a prize to be won or a fortress to be defended. It was simply our home. A week after I gave her the key, Sarah and the kids started spending weekends. Lily would crawl into my bed on Saturday mornings, and we'd read comics together. Jake would help me with small repairs, his little hands passing me tools. The sounds of a living, loving family filled the rooms again. It wasn't the same as before. It was better. It was honest. We had looked into the abyss, and we had chosen to step back together. The foundation of our new family was built on the rubble of the old one, and it was stronger for it. One afternoon, I was in the garage, looking for a specific wrench, when I found the box. It was tucked away on a high shelf, covered in a fine layer of dust. Inside were the remnants of my revenge. The small digital recorder, the notebook filled with my meticulous logs, the printed photos of their staged messes. I held the recorder in my hand, its cold plastic a stark reminder of the dark months of secret keeping. I didn't feel anger or victory looking at it. I felt a profound sadness for the man I had to become to survive. I carried the box outside to the trash bin. I didn't need these trophies anymore. The proof of their betrayal was no longer necessary. The living proof of our reconciliation was eating cookies at my kitchen table. I dropped the box in the bin and closed the lid. The past was finally where it belonged. Ben and Rosalind became permanent fixtures in my life. What started as a legal alliance and a friendly support system had deepened into a true friendship. The three of us had dinner together every Friday night. Sometimes we went out, but mostly we cooked at my place. Rosalind's laughter was a constant, warm sound in my kitchen, and Ben's sharp, logical mind kept our conversations interesting. We talked about books, politics, and the small, funny moments of our weeks. They never treated me as a client or a project. They treated me as a friend. I realized I had not only regained my family, but had also built a new, chosen family in the process. The revenge had isolated me, but the aftermath had connected me to people who valued me for who I was, not for what I could give them. The church's annual fall festival was in full swing on the front lawn. There were games, a bake sale, and children running everywhere. I was manning the ring toss booth with Sarah, who was laughing as a little boy kept missing by a mile. I looked around at the scene, the vibrant community, my daughter by my side, my grandchildren waving at me from the cakewalk. I saw Pastor Mike chatting with Ben and Rosalind. I saw the faces of the people who had stood by me. The memory of that other Sunday, the one where Sarah stood and prayed for patience with my confusion, felt like a story about someone else's life. The humiliation had been washed away, replaced by a deep sense of belonging. The revenge had been a solitary battle, but the peace that followed was a communal celebration. I felt a hand slip into mine. It was Lily. "Come on, Grandpa. You have to try to win a cake," she said, pulling me away from the booth. I went willingly, leaving the past firmly behind me. Winter came, and with it, the first Christmas since the storm. Sarah and the kids moved in for the entire holiday week. We baked cookies, the kitchen dusted with flour and filled with the smell of ginger and cinnamon. We strung lights on the house together, me on the ladder handing strands down to Jake. On Christmas Eve, we all went to the candlelight service at church. When it came time to sing Silent Night, and the sanctuary was lit only by 1,000 small flames, I held my candle high. My voice joined the chorus, strong and clear. I looked at Sarah, her face glowing in the candlelight, her own voice singing next to mine. There was no performance, no hidden agenda. There was only peace, a silent, holy night that we had fought for and won. It was the greatest gift I could have ever received. The long, hard year had culminated in this perfect, peaceful moment. The war was over, and we had won the peace. The new year arrived quietly. One evening, Sarah found me looking at an old photo album, filled with pictures of her mother. "I miss her," Sarah said softly, sitting beside me. "I think I forgot how to be a good person after she was gone. I felt so lost." It was the first time she had connected her actions to the grief we both shared. We talked about her mom for hours, remembering the good times, the person who had been the moral center of our family. That conversation felt like the final piece of the puzzle falling into place. We weren't just healing from the lawsuit. We were healing from an older, deeper hurt. The house felt lighter after that, as if her mother's spirit was finally at rest, knowing her family was whole again. With the legal battles and emotional turmoil behind us, I found a new sense of purpose. I started volunteering with Ben at a free legal clinic for seniors one afternoon a week. I didn't give legal advice, of course. I sat with people, listened to their stories, and offered the one thing I had in abundance: understanding. I saw the same fear in their eyes that I had once felt. I told them, "You have rights. You are not powerless." My presence, the story of my own victory, gave them hope. The revenge I had executed for myself was now a tool I could use to empower others. The anger that had fueled me was gone, replaced by a calm, steady resolve to make sure no one else had to fight that battle alone. Spring returned, and so did the anniversary of the day I'd handed them the envelopes. It passed without drama. There was no tension, no unspoken words. Sarah and I were in the garden, turning the soil for a new vegetable patch. It was hard work, but it felt good. We were planting something new together, literally and figuratively. "You know, Dad," she said, leaning on her shovel, "I was so angry with you for that, for the public shame of it. But I get it now. You had to shock us out of it. You had to make us see." I nodded, wiping sweat from my brow. The revenge had been a drastic measure, but it had been the only language left that they could understand. Now, we didn't need that language anymore. We could just be a father and a daughter, working the earth in comfortable silence. The church decided to start a new ministry based on our experience. They called it the Family Peace Project, offering mediation and support for families struggling with elder care and inheritance issues. Pastor Mike asked Sarah and me to be the first facilitators. We sat in a circle with other families, and we told our story, not as a perfect tale, but as a messy, difficult journey. We didn't have all the answers, but we had empathy. Seeing other families listen, really listen, and start to talk to each other without anger was more rewarding than any court victory. My revenge had created a ripple effect, spreading out from our family and touching the lives of others, turning our pain into a source of peace for the community. One sunny Saturday, the whole family was in the backyard. The kids were playing, Sarah was reading, and I was dozing in my favorite lawn chair. The sound of their happiness was a gentle hum in the air. I realized with a start that I had gotten exactly what I had fought for. I had my home, my freedom, and my family. The revenge was a distant memory, a bitter medicine that had ultimately cured the sickness in our home. I wasn't a confused old man anymore. I was Grandpa, I was Dad, I was Arthur. I had faced down the worst betrayal, and not only survived, but had built something better from the pieces. I closed my eyes again, a deep, contented smile on my face, listening to the sound of my granddaughter's laughter. This was the victory. This was the peace. The summer heat was intense, but the cool of the community pool was a welcome relief. I sat under a large umbrella, watching Sarah play with Lily and Jake in the water. She was tossing a beach ball, their shrieks of joy cutting through the humid air. A woman from the church, Mrs. Gable, sat down next to me. "It does an old heart good to see that, Arthur," she said, nodding toward them. "A family restored is a beautiful sight." I simply smiled and agreed. There was no need to rehash the past. The proof of our healing was right there, splashing in the water for everyone to see. The public shame was now a distant, faded memory, replaced by public joy. My weekly coffee with Ben and Rosalind had become the anchor of my social life. One Friday, Rosalind brought a map of the Pacific Coast Highway. "Just dreaming," she said with a wink. We spent the evening planning a fictional road trip, arguing good-naturedly about the best stops. It was a simple, joyful activity, a world away from the 10 strategy sessions we used to have. Ben no longer looked at me as a client in crisis, but as a friend planning an adventure. The relationship that had been forged in the fire of legal battle had cooled into something strong and enduring. I had gone to Ben for a weapon, but I had found a brother. The Family Peace Project at church held its first major workshop. Sarah and I stood together at the front of the fellowship hall, facing 24 people. We told our story, taking turns. I spoke of the betrayal and the fear. Sarah spoke of the greed and the regret. When we finished, a man raised his hand. His voice trembled as he explained his own similar struggle with his son. "Hearing you too," he said, "gives me hope that we can talk before it ends up in a courtroom." That was the goal. Our story was no longer about our pain. It was a tool to prevent pain in others. My revenge had been a solitary act, but this new purpose was a shared mission. Fall arrived, and with it, a sense of deep, settled peace. The trees in my yard turned brilliant shades of red and gold. One evening, Sarah and I were raking leaves into a huge pile for the kids to jump in. It was hard work, but it felt good. We worked in a comfortable silence, broken only by the rustle of leaves and the children's laughter. There were no more hidden agendas, no more unspoken tensions. We were just a family, doing a simple chore on a crisp autumn day. This mundane, ordinary moment felt more valuable than any legal victory. It was a life I had almost lost, and now I cherished every single leaf. The church was candlelit for the evening service. The choir began to sing Amazing Grace, its familiar melody filling the sanctuary. I held my small, flickering candle and sang along, my voice steady and sure. I looked at the candle flame, a tiny, resilient light in the darkness. It had been a long journey, from a bruise hidden under makeup to this unshakable peace. The revenge was complete, but it had transformed into forgiveness. The lawsuit was over, but it had built a stronger family. The patience they had prayed for had finally been granted, not to them, but to me, the patience to fight, to heal, and to love again. I blew out my candle as the song ended, a peaceful smile on my face. The story was over, and it had ended exactly as it should. If you enjoyed this story of standing up for yourself, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your own thoughts in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the screen now. Thank you for watching.